And here we are. So this is what the other side looks like. Anyway, in this video, we are going to learn how we can determine the user's physical location in the first place. So it's going to be pretty easy for us. We're going to be using something called Geolocation API. So this is built into most modern browsers, by the way. And there's actually a tremendous amount of documentation about it online. Now I'm going to open W3 Schools. I'm going to say W3 and geolocation. So you can read a little bit about it here if you want to. But essentially, this is a function that's going to make a guess about where the user is physically located, depending upon a couple of different parameters, such as the user's IP address, different Wi-Fi networks that are visible in the area, and some other similar information. In practice, it can actually come up with a very good guess of where you are physically located in many cases. So why don't we just try it out? So I'll flip back over to my code editor, and I'll find my app component inside of here. I'm going to make a call to that geolocation API. I'm going to call window navigator geolocation, and then I'll say get current position. And when we call this function, it's not going to instantly return our position. Instead, it's going to take a certain amount of time for this function to determine exactly where our user is. So in order to get a response from this or get some information about where that user is located, we have to pass two separate function callbacks. So the first argument is going to be a function callback that gets called any time that this function successfully gets the user's location. So I'm going to put a callback right here. And I'm going to take the first argument of this callback, which we will call position. And for right now, I'm just going to console log that position to show you what we can get from this function. All right. So we frequently refer to this as the success callback because this is the callback that gets called anytime that everything goes as planned. And we're going to put a comma over here and then enter. And then the second argument, which we've referred to as the failure callback because it's going to be called anytime that the get current position function is unable to determine the user's physical location. So I'll put in a second callback here that will be called with an error. So I'll save this. So now I'm going to flip back onto my browser and we'll see what happens. So I'm going to open up my Chrome Inspector and you'll see that I've already got my position console log over here. Now, chances are you're going to see a little pop-up that says localhost 3000 wants to know your current location. So if you see that little window, click Allow. And then after a couple of seconds, you should eventually see something here that says position, and it will provide you with the guess of the latitude and longitude. Now, if you don't see a position like this, if you eventually see an error message pop up or something like that, that's going to be totally okay. I'll tell you why. So I want to show you a quick little workaround to make sure that you will be able to get some physical callback like this. So if you get an error message, just hit Escape. And then this is going to open this menu. So on that ... right next to the word console, right there, you click on the ... and then select sensors. And then inside the sensors, you'll see that there's this thing called geolocation override. So this is going to force your location to appear as being one of these different locations on these different presets. For example, let's select Sao Paulo. Anytime that I attempt a geolocation call, my location is now going to automatically be returned as Sao Paulo. So like I said, you should only have to do that if you run into some type of error message. So now I'm going to refresh it again, and I'll see that my coordinates are identical to the preset of Sao Paulo right here. All right, so that's how you get the user's location. Now we're going to use this position object right here to get that latitude, because the latitude is going to tell us whether or not the user is in the northern hemisphere or the southern hemisphere. You're following this. I know you are. So now one thing I really want to be able to test as we develop the application is to make sure that we have a good understanding of what happens inside the app if, for some reason, the geolocation call fails. Now, one reason that might cause that call to fail is that if the user does not allow their position to be shared with our app. So we're going to make sure that we develop our application to work even if a user denies that request to share their location. So now, in order to test that flow, to understand what happens inside of our application when it gets denied, we need to reset our permissions to make sure that we get that allow or deny pop-up to appear on our screen. Because, as you might have noticed, every time you refresh this page after allowing it one time, you're never going to be asked again. So in order to get asked again, all you're going to do is find this icon next to our address. And then you'll notice that we get this drop down and it says location. And we are always allowing. Okay, so in order to test our application and make sure that it still works correctly, even if we deny the location request, I can reset this to ask default, like so. And then I can refresh the page, and then I get asked if I'm going to allow localhost to know my location. All right, so this time I'm going to hit block, and then you'll see that we get this position error object that tells us why the geolocation failed. So we're going to be using this a little bit as we go on throughout the rest of this application and this course, just to make sure that the app has a reasonable degree of functionality. All right? So let's take a break here, and we'll come back in the next lecture.